Hi everyone, my name is Apuraj Garikapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Apai.
Don't just watch the story, live it.
After the war with the empire, the palace had been designated as the kingdom's headquarters, a symbol of both pride and defiance. Its beauty matched only by the trouble it had caused. Logan thought quietly that such a future should never be allowed to repeat itself. The massive doors of the castle opened, revealing walls draped in countless banners. Felix and Logan passed through an ornate hallway richly decorated, until they arrived before another tall wooden door. Entering the throne room, both men knelt. Felix saluted respectfully, greeting the master of the nation. The elderly, bearded king addressed Felix as an old friend, and remarked that he had told him many times there was no need for such formality. Felix replied that if those in high positions abandoned responsibility and courtesy, then who would uphold them? The king laughed softly, saying Felix was as unwavering as ever and that such consistency reassured him. The king gestured for Felix to raise his head, then said he wished to see the face of Felix's pupil as well. At that moment, Logan fully realized who stood before him, the king of Grandia, Samuel von Grandia. In later years, history would come to know him as the worthless king. Observing him closely, Logan thought that king looked healthy and strong, which explained why no one had expected his death. Had the king shown even the slightest weakness, the power struggle would have been resolved early and the civil war might never have occurred. To Logan, things were still unfolding exactly as he remembered. The king studied Logan and commented that he seemed to possess the grit necessary to be taught by Felix. He added that Logan was the first young man who had ever stared at him so intently. Startled, Logan immediately lowered his head and apologized. The king waved it off, telling Logan there was no need to adopt Felix's excessive manners, and that he quite liked energetic you. Felix stepped in, stating that Logan's strength matched his will, and that his courage and wisdom, proven by leading his territory to victory despite overwhelming odds, made him a solid foundation for the kingdom's future. The king agreed, saying Logan was indeed worthy of being Felix's pupil. Curious, he asked how the two had first met. Felix brought up an old wound from his past, one dating back to his days as a knight. After hearing the full story, the king burst into laughter, calling it a most curious twist of fate, one he never would have imagined. Turning back to Logan and addressing him by name, the king left Logan at a loss for words. The king then said something that stunned him even more. He expressed his deep gratitude to Logan. Samuel explained that he had long felt indebted to Felix because of that wound, a debt so heavy he could barely speak of it. By resolving Felix's problem, Logan had eased a burden on his heart as well. For that, the king was truly thankful. Felix tried to downplay it, saying the king was giving Logan too much credit, but Samuel refused to hear it. He declared that without Felix, he would never have become king in the first place. He then said that he must express his gratitude properly. As king, he removed a golden bracelet from his wrist and told Logan to step closer. Felix nearly lost his composure, urgently telling His Majesty that he could not give away a royal family treasure, and that Felix himself would compensate Logan instead. It was then revealed that the bracelet was no ordinary ornament. It overflowed with mana, clearly a fifth-class artifact at minimum. The king held it out, telling Logan to accept it as compensation for resolving their troubles. Logan, terrified out of his mind, hesitated, but the king urged him to hurry and take it before he changed his mind. Logan accepted the bracelet and said he would carry this overwhelming gratitude in his heart. Felix shouted from behind that Logan could not accept such a gift so lightly. The king asked Logan if he too believed the gift was excessive. Logan replied honestly that while it was overwhelming, he would make meaningful use of it. Seeing Logan's expression and hearing his words, the king concluded that Logan's ambitions might surpass even his teachers. Felix looked like he was on the verge of collapse. Finally, the king extended his hand and said that this meeting was the result of a good connection, and that he hoped the gift would deepen that bond in the future. Logan lowered his head as Samuel instructed him to serve his teacher as faithfully as the sky itself, and to work for the nation just as Felix had. Logan thought quietly that he wasn't sure whether what he was about to do was for the nation or for himself, but one thing was certain: he would stop the empire at all costs. Logan knelt once more before the king and declared that he would gladly carry out his duty. After their meeting with the king, Felix and Logan strolled through the palace gardens together. Felix remarked that His Majesty must have grown quite soft. He said that the king was never the type to speak so much, nor was he someone who would normally request a personal meeting with Logan. These unusual behaviors worried Felix, making him suspect that the king might be hiding concerns deep in his heart. Hearing this, Logan told Felix not to worry. He explained that although the meeting had been short, he could tell that if the king truly had a problem, he would have told Felix immediately, since he hadn't said anything. It was likely an issue Felix didn't need to concern himself with. After hearing this, Felix looked visibly calmer and smiled. He'd admitted that Logan was right and said that he must have become more prone to worry with age. He added that his heart had wavered, simply because his pupil had accepted a royal treasure so casually. Hearing this, Logan began sweating, unsure how to respond. Felix then told Logan that the bracelet he had received was called the Bracelet of Regeneration. It was an artifact imbued with 5th-class magic, specializing in rapid healing. Because it contained only a single enchantment, its effect was extremely potent, comparable to the holy spell of a higher-ranking priest. Logan immediately grasped the bracelet's potential. A spell of that level could turn fatal wounds into mere scratches. The bracelet possessed regeneration power at the highest possible tier. Felix said that knowing Logan now possessed such an item put his mind at ease. Logan replied that it was all thanks to Felix. However, Felix interrupted him and said that now he could push Logan to the brink of death. Confident that the bracelet would simply repair him afterward, he told Logan to prepare himself. Until seeing this side of Felix, I had believed Logan was the only madman in Grandia, but it seemed Felix might surpass him. At that thought, Logan looked like he was about to wet his pants. Still, he believed this would help him grow stronger. He told Felix that he would do his best to meet his expectations, as the harder he trained, the more progress he would make. It soon became clear that Felix was keeping his word. Lying on the ground, barely conscious, Logan thought that he remembered this scene from somewhere before. Felix stood over him and asked how long he planned to lie there, ordering him to get back up. Suddenly, one of Felix's servants came running and shouted for him. The news the servant brought was something everyone had been waiting for. The Sword Duke had finally had his child. Felix threw a grand celebration, so extravagant that some nobles even thought it excessive for the birth of a daughter. At the party, people whispered among themselves, saying they had heard that the Sword Duke's pupil would also be attending. When they spotted Logan, they approached him and asked if he was the one, commenting that he was much younger than they had expected. Seeing this, Logan could only think about how much attention the title of Sword Duke's pupil attracted, and how the days when he sold emporicate parties felt like a lifetime ago. Logan then turned around and saw Felix. He was holding his baby in his arms, standing beside the Duchess, and he looked like the happiest man in the entire world. Soon, a servant announced the arrival of an important guest, the Bishop of Grandia's United Holy Order. The man introduced was Crimson Matthew. The bishop stepped forward to congratulate Felix on the birth of his descendant, and Felix thanked him, saying he was honored that the bishop had come personally. The bishop replied that there was no way he would send a servant when the very foundation of the country, the Sword Duke, had welcomed his first child. His presence alone left everyone around utterly astounded. Logan thought to himself that most nobles received a holy blessing at birth. Among those blessings was one granted in the name of the fifth of the 9 gods, Agna, the goddess of trees and life, a blessing every parent wished for to ensure their child's health. On top of that, receiving a blessing directly from the bishop himself made it no surprise that Felix was so happy at this moment. Everyone gathered around the steps where the bishop, Felix, the Duchess, and the baby stood. The bishop took the baby into his hands, raised the child high above his head, and declared that this humble servant requested the great 9 gods who watched over this world to bless the child. Watching this scene, Logan finally understood the difference between holy power and mana. Holy power was closer to the root than force and far less visible than mana. That was why ordinary people couldn't feel it at all and could only see it manifest as bright light. The bishop continued declaring that in the name of Agna, the goddess of life, he blessed this newly born Esperanza. At that moment, tens of thousands of powerful streams of blue light surged toward the bishop and the child. Those who witnessed it were left in awe. Everyone immediately began congratulating the Duke, saying that with such a powerful light, the child was surely destined to grow up healthy and strong, but that was not what actually happened. The only ones who seemed to realize this were Logan and the bishop. The holy power had been deflected from the baby's body. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pi grow naturally. Seeing the bishop's expression, Felix grew anxious and asked what was wrong. The bishop replied that nothing was wrong at all, explaining that he was simply tired after performing a blessing for the first time in so long. He apologized and said he would now take his leave. As the bishop descended the stairs, the Duke and his Duchess watched him, their expressions revealing that they too sensed something unusual about the event. Observing this, Logan thought that since holy power was only one of many forms of power, it was possible the baby possessed a peculiar constitution that resisted it. Even so, Logan felt deeply uncomfortable. That discomfort seemed to originate from Count Befroze, who was standing in front of Logan and now saluted him. Befroze remarked that it was a shame Logan appeared rather unwell. Logan returned to the greeting and replied that he was quite well, thanking Befroze for his concern. Befroze said Logan was as cheeky as ever, to which Logan calmly replied that it was one of his many charms. In the next instant, Befroze clenched his fist and shattered the glass in his hand. The sharp sound drew everyone's attention. Befroze said it was the first time he had made such a mistake, but given his age, his hand slipped from time to time. A servant hurried over, offering a cloth to stop the bleeding and clean him up. Befroze then told Logan that the only reason Logan was still alive was because, by sheer chance, he had become the Sword Duke's pupil. He stepped closer and said that thanks to this, Logan had managed to attract the attention of many higher-ranking nobles, making him a very lucky man. As he spoke, he shoved the blood-stained cloth into Logan's hand. Logan accepted the cloth and thought that for a count, Befroze was surprisingly immature. He replied that he was, of course, aware of how lucky he had been after all. He had even managed to regress. Befroze said he hoped Logan would maintain that same attitude even after meeting higher nobles. Logan didn't understand what Befroze meant, so Befroze clarified. He told Logan that Romain Vengrandia, His Highness, the second prince, wished to meet him. Befroze added that he hoped Logan would refuse. Logan interpreted this clearly. If he didn't take the second prince's side, Befroze would make him pay. Logan replied that it would be an honor to be introduced to His Highness, the second prince, by Befroze, and that he would carefully deliberate on the suggestion. Hearing this, Befroze scoffed, saying Logan's words were arrogant and that the prince's orders were not mere suggestions. Logan stepped closer to Befroze and calmly said that he believed it was a suggestion and that Befroze surely wouldn't want him and his teacher to do something foolish, like joining the other side. As he spoke, Logan neatly placed the bloodied cloth into Befroze's breast pocket. Befroze clenched his fist and told Logan that he would soon notify him of the date. He warned that if this was another one of Logan's deceptions, then Logan would be paying a debt far greater than he could imagine. Logan simply smiled from within the crowd and said he would be waiting for Befroze's message. As Befroze walked away, Logan thought that Befroze could run his mouth all he wanted for now. Once the Civil War began, Befroze wouldn't even have time to think about him. There were only a few months left, and all Logan had to do was delay meeting him until then. Logan also thought that despite having power comparable to a Margrave, Befroze was acting as nothing more than a messenger for the second prince. In that sense, Count Befroze had already become a laughingstock. It turns out that Befroze was in conversation with Jordan Valtermain, the Blazing Heat Sword, one of the kingdom's 5 dukes, a superhuman aura wielder, and also the maternal grandfather of the second prince. Jordan briefly noticed Logan, but only for a couple of seconds before turning his head away. Logan immediately understood that he was being openly ignored. To someone like Jordan, Logan simply wasn't worth acknowledging. After all, the real target here was never him, but Felix. While Logan was still thinking about this, a man approached him from behind and spoke softly, addressing him formally as young Master Logan. Logan turned and saw Lord Varon Kiros, his uncle. Varon laughed warmly, clearly pleased to see Logan, commenting on how long it had been since they last met and how proud he felt seeing Logan all grown up. Logan, however, asked him bluntly what nonsense he was spouting. Varon Kiros was his mother's elder brother and the successor of the Kiros family, a house tied to the McClynster marriage. Yet Logan couldn't recall Varen ever truly acting like an uncle. A memory surfaced from Logan's childhood, where he had once called Varen uncle during a gathering, only to be mocked and warned not to overstep his place. Back then, Varen had looked down on him like he was nothing more than filth. Back in the present, Varen explained that even if they lacked direct blood ties, the world still recognized the Kiros and M. Clean families as bound by marriage. Logan coldly asked whether those ties hadn't already been severed. Varen laughed, telling him not to use such harsh words, insisting that mistakes were made in the past. But kin was still kin. He reminded Logan of the support the Kiros family had supposedly given the McClins over the last decade, and asked if Logan truly couldn't overlook a single mistake. Logan recalled his mother's face during the Tesseran attack, when the Kiros family had turned their backs and abandoned them. He replied that if that mistake hadn't involved closing their eyes while their own kin fell off a cliff, perhaps he could have forgiven it. But not now. Varen felt insulted, thinking Logan had grown far too bold after gaining a little fame. He judged Logan as reckless, still acting without thinking. To Varen, manipulating someone like him shouldn't be difficult. He then admitted that what his family had done was indeed unforgivable, and offered a formal apology on behalf of the Kiros family. Logan calmly told him that Varen seemed well aware it was far too late for apologies. Varen cursed him internally but forced a smile. He said that if Logan wanted compensation, he would provide it, pulling out a blank check and handing it over. He added that reconciliation between kin was better than permanent separation. Logan accepted the check and asked if Varen planned to say nothing else after offering compensation, especially since he claimed to be apologizing. Varen clenched his teeth in humiliation. Then, shocking everyone nearby, he bowed deeply before Logan and begged for his help, promising to do whatever Logan asked, and to focus on the future rather than the past. Logan found it absurd that the successor of the Kiros family, a man who had never reflected on his own faults, was behaving this way. Something rotten was clearly happening. This wasn't genuine remorse, it was pressure from above. Logan noticed another man in the background, Duke Owen Douglas, the first prince's paternal grandfather, and the only Sixth Circle magician in the kingdom, standing in direct opposition to Jordan Valterman. Logan realized that whether it was Kiros or Bifrost, two of the three richest men in the kingdom were ultimately being forced into submission by the Duke's schemes. And if those men were involved, then he had something important he could entrust to them. He told Varen to raise his head and said that small favors between kin didn't need to be complicated. Asking if Varen agreed, Logan leaned closer and whispered something into Varen's ear. Varen initially thanked him, but as the request sank in, his expression collapsed into despair. Logan, meanwhile, wore a wide grin. Logan told him that if he fulfilled this single request, arranging a meeting with the first prince would be simple. Varen nodded in defeat, saying he understood and would do exactly as Logan wished. At that moment, a voice interrupted them, calling for everyone's attention. It was Lefman, a vassal of the Esperanza family, announcing that the most important ceremony of the celebration was about to begin. With the safe arrival of the young lady, it was time to welcome the person who would grant her a name. As Lefman prepared to announce it, he hesitated and turned to the Duke and Duchess for confirmation, still unable to believe it. They nodded. Lefman then declared that His Grace's pupil, young Master Logan, would be the one to name the child. As Logan passed Lefman and ascended the stairs toward Felix, the crowd murmured in disbelief. Logan took the baby into his arms, immediately noticing how bright and precious her eyes were. He sensed that she had been bathed in Felix's aura from birth, her vitality overflowing. The baby seemed comfortable, even reaching out toward Logan's face, causing him to blush. Logan had thought of many names before, yet in this moment, they all vanished from his mind. Finally, he spoke, declaring that her name would be Stella, meaning star in the ancient tongue. He expressed his hope that she would become a radiant beacon, shining brightly even in the darkest night. Felix and the Duchess were visibly moved, joy clear on their faces. Felix lowered his head with pride and gratitude, accepting the name wholeheartedly. Standing beside them on the stairs, Logan still found it strange that holy power had been repelled from her earlier, but seeing their happiness, he pushed the thought aside, convincing himself that it was probably nothing serious. Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps Amazing Up High grow naturally. Rick arrived with his arms full of letters, stacking them in front of Logan as if trying to make a point. He explained that nobles from all directions had sent invitations, hoping to meet Logan after the naming ceremony. Logan barely glanced at them and told Rick to leave everything in his room, because he planned to refuse every single request. Rick was clearly confused, unable to understand why Logan would ignore such opportunities. Logan simply replied that they needed to return to their estate as soon as possible. The Civil War was approaching and preparation mattered more than social games. He thought it was unfortunate that he never managed to meet the third prince during his stay, but that regret would have to wait. Right now, returning home came first. Dwayne had already contacted him with news that the estate was thriving beyond expectations. The harvest this year was estimated to be nearly 20 times higher than projected, enough to sustain them for at least 3 or 4 years. Logan felt a growing urge to see everything with his own eyes. Felix stepped forward and told Logan to pause his training for the moment. He then revealed that he had one final secret art to pass on before Logan departed. The words left Logan stunned, standing face to face. Logan admitted his surprise at being taught another secret technique so suddenly. Felix calmly replied that he was aware Logan possessed something even greater already, leaving Logan momentarily speechless. It was clear Felix was referring to the ancient secret art. Felix acknowledged that he had spoken poorly of that art in the past, but when used properly, it could surpass even his own techniques. Still, he reminded Logan that one thing mattered above all else. When asked what that was, Logan answered without hesitation that fundamentals came first. Felix nodded in approval and explained that the art he was about to teach would amplify those very fundamentals. He went on to explain that the martial path he built focused on restricting the enemy's movement while maximizing one's own, ultimately granting control over the battlefield itself. Clenching his fist, Felix said the heavy sword was the first true manifestation of that philosophy. What he would now teach Logan was the purified form of his martial arts, the very foundation that led him to awaken as an aura user. Felix told Logan to watch carefully. In the next instant, his figure vanished like a shadow. Logan was left stunned. He hadn't even seen Felix move, and it didn't feel like he had approached from behind either. Before Logan could react, Felix had already seized him by the neck. Logan realized the strange movement was something he had encountered before during their sparring sessions, a technique he could never fully track with his eyes. Felix asked Logan what he thought of it, but Logan remained speechless. He admitted internally that it was impressive, yet wondered if such movement alone could truly elevate someone to becoming an aura user. A superhuman like Felix would naturally be impossible to follow. But what about ordinary warriors? Felix seemed to read his thoughts and asked Logan what the foundation of all martial arts truly was. Logan answered that it was the legs and the steps one takes. Felix said that answer was correct, but only for non-force users. The reason Felix stood above other aura users in the kingdom was because of the very technique he had just used, known as Spirit Shadow. The name felt unsettling to Logan, but judging by Felix's pride in it, the technique was unquestionably valuable. Felix casually mentioned Logan's trouble with the knight named France, striking a sarcastic pose as he remarked that such difficulties would never have happened if Logan had mastered Spirit Shadow earlier. He then asked if Logan wanted to learn it. There wasn't a hint of hesitation in Logan's expression. Every hardship he had endured only strengthened his resolve. Felix began teaching him immediately, instructing Logan to lighten his steps and allow his heels to touch the ground only at the moment of jumping. He silently noted Logan's extraordinary talent. Within just a few hours, Logan had nearly replicated the movement and was already internalizing it, as if full mastery were only a matter of time. Felix felt a rare sense of satisfaction, realizing that decades of waiting had finally paid off upon meeting Logan. Even so, Felix shouted at him repeatedly, telling him he was still too slow and needed to move lighter while maintaining stronger force. He did this intentionally, believing that excessive praise was poison for a genius. Logan, meanwhile, continued to view himself as lacking, though a touch of humility did him no harm. After some time, Felix told him to stop, saying he had done well, and only needed continued practice to fully internalize the technique. Noticing Logan's thoughtful expression, Felix asked what was bothering him. Logan admitted that the movement felt incredible, and that he already felt twice as fast as before, but it didn't seem like something a knight would naturally create. It felt closer to something else entirely. Felix completed his thought, suggesting it resembled an assassin's technique. Logan didn't respond, but his silence confirmed it. Felix explained that Logan wasn't entirely wrong. Back when the king was still a prince, Felix had been newly knighted and appointed as his personal guard. Even before ascending the throne, the future king had countless enemies. Protecting him meant facing horrors beyond conventional battlefields. As a young royal knight filled with excitement, Felix had encountered bloodshed greater than what frontline soldiers endured. He needed a way to move faster, more quietly, and dominate space with a single strike. That need gave birth to Spirit Shadow. When Felix finally mastered it, he awakened his aura soon after. Felix warned Logan not to become arrogant simply for understanding the theory, and reminded him that true mastery required a lifetime of dedication to the sword. Logan acknowledged this and bowed deeply before his master. He understood that this was the very path the greatest swordsman in the kingdom had walked to become a superhuman. Before Logan could leave, Felix added that there was one more reason he had called him back. He calmly revealed that the third prince wished to meet him. Under the cover of night, Felix and Logan moved swiftly through the town, their bodies gliding almost unnaturally as they used the newly learned technique to travel freely toward the palace. Logan asked if this kind of movement was the reason Felix had taught him Spirit Shadow, and Felix confirmed that this was indeed one of its purposes. Moments later, they descended to the ground. Their destination turned out to be an abandoned house hidden within the woods. As they stepped inside, Logan scanned the surroundings, wondering if the third prince truly lived in such a neglected place on the outskirts of the outer castle. Felix then knocked on the floor itself. In response, hidden underground stairs revealed themselves, opening silently. As they descended, Logan asked whether it was really necessary to go this far just for a meeting. Felix replied that many eyes were currently watching him, and beyond that, meeting the Sword Duke's pupil naturally attracted even more attention. Felix then asked Logan whether he had heard of the third prince before. Logan hesitated, unsure how to respond. Before admitting that he had heard rumors claiming the third prince was the only one fit to become king, Felix immediately warned him never to say such things in public, as words like that could create serious trouble for everyone involved. At the bottom of the stairs, Felix knocked on a door and announced himself. A voice from inside invited them to enter. Felix opened the door and they removed their hoods. Felix greeted the prince warmly, saying it had been a long time. The prince responded just as pleasantly, saying it was good to finally see him again. Before turning his attention to Logan with a bright smile, he asked if Logan was the Duke's pupil. Logan stepped forward ahead of his teacher, while Felix's expression turned serious. Logan knelt respectfully and formally greeted the third prince, saying it was an honor to meet him. As he did so, Logan thought that this was finally his chance. He could now judge for himself whether the third prince was truly fit to rule. Soon after, the three of them sat together sharing a cup of coffee. The prince asked Logan how he had managed to become a high-ranking knight at such a young age, remarking that it was an impressive accomplishment. Logan responded humbly, saying the prince was praising him too much and that any progress he had made came from gaining a small insight under a great teacher. The prince laughed and replied that if such a small insight had brought Logan this far, then he must be destined for far greater things than someone mediocre like himself. The comment made Logan spit out his coffee in shock, quickly apologizing and insisting he meant no disrespect. The prince laughed again and admitted he was only teasing him. He then explained that he had heard many stories about Logan, not just about his combat ability, but also how he had rescued his declining family and expanded their influence. The prince told him that such achievements truly made Logan worthy of being called a hero. Logan thanked him for the praise, while silently noting that the prince was surprisingly well informed about matters most nobles would dismiss as unimportant. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pie grow naturally. Logan glanced at Felix, who subtly shook his head, signaling that he had not been the source of this information. Seeing this, the prince explained that since Felix had spoken so highly of Logan, he conducted his own investigation. He then asked if he had offended Logan in any way. Logan assured him that he had not and expressed gratitude for the prince's interest. As Logan studied him more closely, he realized that the third prince was not just slightly better than his brothers. He might surpass them by far. The prince then said they should stop circling the topic and get straight to the point. He explained that Logan might not yet realize it, but the fate of the kingdom was already in danger. The nobles had split the country into two opposing factions, each trying to devour the other. While open warfare had not yet broken out, the situation was a ticking time bomb. The prince bluntly stated that two reckless men who cared nothing for common people were poisoning the kingdom and would eventually bring it to ruin. That was why he needed capable individuals. He needed power to drive out those leeches draining the country dry. Felix was stunned by the bluntness of his words. The prince then turned to Felix, saying he understood his position and knew that as a powerless prince, he could not command the sword duke's pupil to serve him, but that was never his intention. He turned back to Logan and declared that Logan was a genius of the century and a treasure of the kingdom. He expressed his hope that when the time came, talented people like Logan would stand by his side. He'd extended his hand and asked Logan if he could do that for him. Logan felt that this was exactly what he had been waiting for. He told the prince that he deeply agreed with his views and that after meeting him in person, he realized the rumors were not wrong. The third prince truly seemed to be the only candidate fit to rule. However, Logan explained that there were obstacles preventing him from serving under the prince immediately. The prince replied that he had expected as much and assumed Logan had no interest. Logan clarified that this was not the case at all and that the prince's potential alone was more than sufficient. He added that it was widely known that the other princes were already engaging in disgraceful behavior, which left Felix visibly shocked. Felix tried to interrupt, saying Logan was not in a position to speak about the princes, but the third prince stopped him, stating that Logan was free to continue. Logan explained that his estate was currently in conflict with Count Bafros, a dangerous enemy who could not be opposed lightly at their current strength. He needed to resolve this issue first before answering the prince's call. The prince thought for a moment before asking whether Logan was aligned with the second prince. Logan replied that if given some time, he would deal with Bafros and then support the third prince with the restored power of the MacLeans. In return, the prince would have Logan as his sword. The prince found this proposal intriguing, remarking that such confidence was fitting for the sword duke's pupil. He extended his hand again and told Logan that he would prepare a gift for him once that day came. Logan reached out and shook his hand, and the prince told him to look forward to it. After leaving the abandoned house, Felix asked Logan what he had been thinking. When he effectively pledged himself to the third prince, Logan asked if he had come across as too direct, explaining that he only meant after handling his own matters. Felix scoffed, calling Logan a crafty brat and saying he understood perfectly what Logan meant. Logan laughed and replied that he did it because he trusted Felix. Felix reminded him that he had warned Logan he could guarantee nothing. Felix then said he knew that was not the whole story and told Logan he could share his worries if he wished. As Felix might be able to help, Logan looked up silently before asking Felix which of the three princes he believed should become king. Felix avoided the question, saying it was not his place to decide, and that it was ultimately the king's choice. Logan then shared a saying he had heard. The first prince would become a tyrant who destroyed the royal family, while the second prince would become a terrible king who ruined the nation. Felix reacted sharply, asking who dared to say such things. Logan thought to himself that Felix himself had said those words in his previous life, and doubted his opinion had truly changed. Logan stated that he believed those words, and felt that the third prince would be far better than the other two. He asked Felix directly what he thought. Felix hesitated once again, seeing this. Logan clarified that he wanted Felix's honest opinion. Felix looked down at him, considered his words carefully, and finally admitted the truth that he shared the same sentiment. Hearing this, Logan felt a sense of certainty. For now, it might only be a seed planted in Felix's thoughts, but when the unexpected chaos erupted, that seed would bloom. Logan then told Felix to protect the third prince until he came of age, even though he knew turmoil would strike before then. Felix sighed and told Logan that he had always known he was intriguing, but admitted that he had no idea what Logan was truly planning. As they left the castle grounds, Logan fell into deep thought. Over the past 2 months, he had accomplished a great deal. He had confirmed the king's condition and personally met the third prince. He had secured trade routes and networks through Kiros and obtained a promise of cooperation, which would make acquiring supplies for the upcoming civil war far easier. With all of that settled, Logan felt it was finally time to return to the MacLeans and that was exactly what he did. As they passed through open fields, Henderson remarked that the journey had been worthwhile, as they had been able to dedicate their time and grand to training. Another knight agreed, adding that they had even crossed swords with the Sword Duke's knights, which alone made the trip valuable. Still, he said that the greatest gain from this expedition was something else entirely. Henderson immediately agreed. It was obvious what they were talking about: Logan's engagement. The knights quietly discussed it, with Henderson admitting that he never would have believed Logan would find his match in the capital. Another knight mentioned hearing rumors that Logan had already made up his mind after their very first date. They then wondered aloud what Logan liked so much about her, not realizing that he could hear every word. Logan answered that question silently in his own mind. What drew him to Eileen was her power and her combat ability. His gaze shifted to his newly engaged fiancée. He knew that, in truth, he was bringing her back to Mauchline to be trained as a knight, even though their engagement existed only on paper for now. Because of that, convincing her father had not been easy. The man had been deeply concerned about his precious daughter becoming a knight, especially when Logan planned to take her away the very day after their discussion. In fact, he had clearly stated that if Logan so much as touched her before the wedding, he would personally cut off his head. Eileen suddenly spoke up, asking Logan to keep his promise to her. Logan asked what she meant. She replied that she could not leave without results after coming all this way, so he had to honor what he promised her. Hearing this, Logan looked down at Eileen, noticing how tightly she was gripping her skirt. In that moment, he understood the feeling she was experiencing, the weight of leaving behind the place where she had lived her entire life. Logan told her that he would honor his promise no matter what. Hearing that, Eileen said softly that she hoped they would arrive soon. Soon they reached the McLean estate. Inside, Logan and Eileen stood before the other members of the family, and Logan calmly announced that he was back. However, no one seemed particularly focused on his return, because their attention was completely stolen by the girl standing beside him. Shock rippled through the hall, and even Patrick stared in disbelief, silently admitting that the two actually looked good together. Patrick welcomed Logan home and immediately asked who the young lady was. Logan introduced her as Lady Eileen Floyd, his fiancée. The servants instantly lost their composure, struggling to believe what they had just heard. Patrick felt overwhelming joy, thinking that when he requested help from the Sword Duke, he had only hoped for a courtship, yet Logan had returned with a full engagement, far exceeding every expectation he had. As Patrick began welcoming Eileen, nearly calling himself her father-in-law, Logan cut in and dropped another bombshell announcing that Eileen would also be joining the McLean Knights Order. Eileen stepped forward confidently, reintroducing herself and declaring that she would serve both as a daughter-in-law and as a knight to the best of her ability. Patrick immediately turned pale, looking moments away from collapse, while Ronnie appeared oddly thrilled. Patrick would have strangled Logan on the spot if Dwayne had not restrained him, demanding to know why anyone would want their fiancé thrown into battlefield training. Hinckley stepped in, pointing out that nothing like this had ever happened before, but realistically, no one possessed the authority to stop Logan anyway. Ronnie tried introducing himself properly to welcome Eileen into the family, but his mother rushed in and dragged him away before he could finish, leaving both Logan and Eileen stunned. Moments later, Hamer approached and bluntly told Eileen to run while she still could, insisting that Logan was definitely fooling her, and that ever since her arrival, the noble court had started acting like a circus. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Apai. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.